Hello, brothers and sisters, good morning. It is nearly 9 o'clock, not that the time matters. It is close to equinox now. I think the 21st to 22nd is the equinox. Autumn is upon us. It truly feels like autumn now when I'm out in nature. But for today's video, I put out a little poll, and actually what won that poll was winning that poll currently is day in nature vlog. So look out for that. That will come. In-depth training breakdown is something key I'm working on. I do want to do that on some shaking weight stuff, shaking in the gym, which ties into also someone asked for Ayatollah Edger, asked for more on TRE, which I just filmed with David Baselli. If you've looked into TRE, you'll know Dr. David Baselli is the guy that founded it, and I had a Zoom call with him yesterday, and he took me through on the floor here, and we filmed it, one of his sessions, and it was so good and so powerful, and it's simplistic. So I feel like it is great if you can get an instructor to guide you through TRE, but David Baselli in that one, to me, I think you could copy that and do it at home yourself, and hopefully find the shakes the same way that I found them. And he guided me through, and it was very logical, and together we solved some stuff. So more on TRE will come. And Chris mentioned stuff about, we spoke about roller recovery, what about recovery tools? And so I will do, I think, yeah, all in the pipeline. But for this video, sorry, I'm pointing a pen at you. For this video, Fellas with Feelings said, I'd love to know the 3 people or things that have the biggest influence on your development, which is quite specific, well, not specific, but development is, you know, it means something, and that could mean you could take that several different ways. But what I've done is I'm going to separate this. I'm going to do the 3 greatest kind of sports influences, which truly is an influence on my development in some areas. But for this one, I'm going to do the 3 greatest influences on me spiritually, which is again going to be very influential on development, in a more challenging way than the sporting inspirations inspire you one way. Spiritual inspirations inspire you in a tougher way, because it's all the undoing, it's all the going inside. And so I've got there's a few people that I'll give sort of honourable mentions to. We'll start with, and then I'll go into my kind of 3 as of today, as of 2020, September 2020. I have to give a shout out to Russell Brand. For those of you may have seen, I did a compilation of Russell Brand called Awakened Man. I think that's what I called it, with a nice background soundtrack from a movie. Oh, what was the movie? It was a really nice background soundtrack, but it was like 11-minute compilation of Russell Brand. You might have seen it on my channel, you might have seen it re-uploaded in other places, but it was essentially a compilation of him, and there was a period in time when he was doing interviews. He was really in the public eye, but every interview he was doing, he was going on, you know, morning TV shows. He was doing interviews on yoga YouTube channels, interviews on Conscious TV and stuff. I think he was on the Gaia, or whatever Gaia used to be, We Are Conscious or something. And every interview he'd just be he dropped such good kind of show his spiritual awareness and knowledge. Now, fast forward to the last few years, there are a lot of people who think he's some sort of shill, that he's spoke up for voting. He turned at the last minute, he said, oh no, we need to vote for Labour, this is the solution, and people see that as him being a shill. Maybe he is. For me, I kind of saw that as him just being as lost as all of us, and being convinced of one thing. Like, I've had very strong views about something, and then seen the logic and rationality, someone's explained something to me in a way, and I've gone, oh, that makes sense to me now, and kind of promoted that message. And it's not because I'm a shill or I've been paid, it's because I've just seen a new way of looking at things, and maybe he thought voting Labour was the kind of the solution that we needed, and that was the way to go. And I don't think that makes him a shill, but at the same time, it doesn't make him not one. So I don't really know. But in that moment in time, that chapter of my life, when he was speaking this stuff, and I was just getting into spirituality, and I could really feel what he was saying and the depth of it, and what he's up against when he says this stuff, and how it's going over so many people's heads. I wanted to make that compilation just to capture these nuggets of spiritual wisdom, and that is my most viewed video on YouTube by far. I think it's at 3, maybe 4 million views now. I'll just have a quick search. Don't know if I've retitled it. Yeah, Awakened Man, 4 million views 6 years ago. I made that one, and so I think that was a chapter that definitely influenced me. And regardless of the overall goals of it, it helped me raise in consciousness, regardless, or inspired me to like feel more confident in the thoughts I had about life, in that were more spiritually based, but society would reject. And I think that's the theme with a lot of this stuff. Another one, I'd mentioned Paulo Coelho. He's a good author. He wrote The Pilgrimage. He did write The Pilgrimage. He wrote The Alchemist, which is more famous. There's a quite. I will do like a book breakdown as well. But Paulo, I just read Valkyries by him. There was The Pilgrimage, Valkyries and Pilgrimage. He's the main character in those, and they're quite nice. But I just thought he's quite a spiritual author that I like. Wouldn't put him as highly influential to me as what I felt the inspiration from Russell Brand, but still up there. Wim Hof, man, I think Wim Hof's really good. If you looked at the spiral dynamic stuff, I think he's fully yellow going turquoise. He's really like in his free spirit child energy, but it's kind of the wise child, if that makes sense. He's dealt with a lot of his emotions. I think that's what comes off in him. He's balanced but joyful and playful at the same time. He's wise. He understands our relationship to nature and how nature is our teacher. And it does take a while for that to sink into what that means when he says cold is our teacher, cold is your friend kind of thing. But Wim Hof, I would put him as up there on greatest influences, but not in the top 3. Not that there's competition, but so number 3 for me is the guy who completely started my spiritual journey or spiritual understanding. And I remember listening to this guy, Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth. I was listening to the audiobook with my best friend at the time. That's weird, isn't it? You can say he's my best friend, and that changes over time. It's like, anyway, we shared a good chapter of our life together. Jan Barczykowski, in our free running days. I stayed at his house in Charlton in London. He was at university, and I was able to stay over. And he was a few years younger than me, and he was like, do you mind if I put this on? I've been listening to this when I go to sleep. And he put on his laptop on iTunes. He had an illegal, I guess, download of Eckhart Tolle reading his book, A New Earth, and played it from the start to me. And I just remember lying in bed, just like wide awake, listening to it like, oh my gosh, he's saying things that I kind of think, but he's wording them in a way. And it was the first time I realized other people thought like me, and it wasn't strange. It was depth or something like that. And it's like, not that I was thinking as deep as Eckhart, but I was confused by life. There was something wasn't quite right with life at that time. And I think I'd been successful up till then in the things I'd done, and yet I hadn't quite found happiness, and I didn't know why. And A New Earth, for me, a lot of people read A Power of Now, and I haven't actually read that one, so I can't speak truly on it, but I guess that's quite based on like using your time and doing stuff in this moment now. And A New Earth, it gave me that same inspiration, but it came from such a like understanding ego perspective. I actually want to go back into New Earth. It's been a while since I listened to that one. But I remember this period of my life when I was listening to it. I would be going around airports and travelling a lot at the time, and I'd just have him in, and I'd be stood in a line, like a long line at the airport, and see everyone frustrated, and I would be like totally zen about the whole situation. But it was kind of because I was listening to that. If I wasn't listening to that, I still would have struggled to be completely patient, standing in line. But it helped me to be more patient. And A New Earth, he really explains yourself and your own thoughts, and helps you to separate from kind of the negativity inside you and recognize that that's not you. That's kind of a program of your past that's playing out. That was really useful to see, and that there is kind of a new earth emerging. And I think this 2020 is a big part of that new earth emerging from the old, and those who recognize that the old ways don't serve us, and to, less judgment and more acceptance kind of thing going forward. And so A New Earth was an amazing book that I only listened to the audiobook, but changed my life at that point. It did, if I'm truly honest and sharing, it led me, I had a big depressed chapter of my life after listening to that, because it made me see with clearer eyes the truth of the world, which is such a painful process. And that's happened several times at several new awarenesses in my life. And I think that's one of the biggest things that keeps people in their awareness they're at, is because enlightenment is a painful process. Is a breaking down. Is a bringing light to the dark. And it sounds so cliche and spiritual woo-woo stuff, but it's so true. And that really brought the dark to the light. But because of that awareness, I was then able to grow into living truth more, in the truth of and honesty of myself, my health, my person, what actually can make me happy, my relationship to God, all of that stuff really helped me with. So that is number 3, Eckhart Tolle. Number 2 is someone, and it feels more newer to me and not as deep, and it's like someone like Eckhart, there was a bigger gain because it came from much less awareness to it was like a bigger jump, whereas this is more incremental because I'm already quite aware as I discovered this person. But this is what I've been shared lately, that's divine truth, and that's AJ and Mary. I don't know the female's name when she's not Mary. AJ, who believes him to be Jesus from the 1st century, but regardless, or irregardless, what an influential human. I read a book once that was I listened to it, sorry. It wasn't a book, it was talks, and it was about the 4 most influential people of all time, and that was Buddha, Muhammad, Confucius, which was very interesting because you don't hear Confucius mentioned so much, but he was, for Asia, he's one of the most influential for Chinese Asia, and then Jesus, and it just sort of compared how they lived, what they taught, what was different with what they taught. Confucius was very family orientated and some of the others weren't. I found that stuff interesting, respect your elders, and that's kind of Asian culture, it's kind of that. But Jesus was the most influential person of the planet of all time. I think that's come through. And this guy, I say regardless, but I don't want to put disrespect on him because who knows, right? But what he's teaching is what matters, and his teaching and about how is all about your honest hard work, because it's sitting with your emotions and not distracting yourself, trying to find the root emotion, not putting blame on anyone else, and taking the time that it takes to feel these emotions that have been stored up that cause us to act out. Eckhart's great for understanding it, but the practical implication of Eckhart stuff is not as deep as what AJ has done here. Not that, like I say, it's not comparison, but this is the deeper work. It's that led me to that, led me to this, and this is the chapter I'm in right now. So this is why he's number 2. And it's any of the Divine Truth talks you can watch. There's one I was watching recently on cause and effect, and how we focus so much on dealing with the effect that we never get to the cause. So it's exactly with coronavirus is a perfect example. Is we focus so much on fighting the virus that the reason for the virus to come into our world, if that's what it is not been faced. We're not ignoring that completely. We're just trying to deal with the effects constantly, and it's how we live most of our lives. It's the reason we put makeup covering up our bad skin or whatever people do. In Cause and Effect, he talked about if you get a flat tire on the motorway, your soul did that to you because it's to teach you a lesson. It's like how many times you stub your toe or bang your head and you weren't present, or beyond weren't present, you were actually in a negative or judgmental frame of mind, and then that thing happened. And that happens so much, or just when you're scatterbrained or you're thinking too fast or you're too ahead of yourself. And I put the distiller on yesterday, and it was like my head was wasn't as relaxed state, and I got back 2 hours later and it was all over the floor because I hadn't put the jug quite perfectly under the water dripping, and the water had dripped, and there's 2 hours and 2 litres of water on the floor because of me being kind of rushed. And that was the soul doing it to me, teaching me a lesson. And I just think there is that. I mean, that's just one slight teaching of it, but the whole thing he teaches about emotions, how he explains the sleep state and where we go when we sleep, the soul development. And I've mentioned enough of this stuff before, but yeah, I just want to say he's been the most influential to me now. It feels like good, honest, hard work, self-reflection, looking at myself truly, working on that relationship that's been neglected to God and myself, and taught me stuff about relationships with my parents that I've not heard anyone else say. So really good stuff from him. And so that brings me to the first, number 1 most influential teacher to me spiritually, can you guess it? To quote Socrates, I think it was Socrates, know thyself, me. I think I have to give myself credit for that one, if not the Most High. But observing myself, observing my reactions to situations, observing my habits, observing my addictions, trying to understand why, what it's covering up, observing when I have a bad night's sleep, why, observing when I blame people and I find it hard to own a problem in a relationship, when I at every situation lately now, if I feel like someone else to blame for something, like there's some stuff when you like completely like, you can get to a level of humility where you really don't blame people for much. You just, you know, you're not judging. If someone's late, you don't say, oh, why are you late? You're wasting my time, whatever. You just kind of like accept the situation that you chose to be there, and that friend is that way, and you kind of accept that when you arrange to meet them, that could happen, and it's not their fault, that's their issue, and you know, you don't blame. But then there's still so many situations when kind of like business is involved, or even families, when it's like old habits and old programs are running, where you still find yourself blaming rather than taking responsibility, and you're sovereign, that if you gave someone power, then you gave them power, and that's your responsibility to respect yourself so much that you don't give them power that you can then blame them for something. It's like, no, you like the example with the friend who's late, that goes a lot deeper into business relationships and stuff, where it's your responsibility for and with family the same thing. It's like, if you keep turning up to your family's house and keep arguing, and you keep stepping below, playing into a role, and it's your responsibility to just either not go and say, I'm not going to meet you on these terms, I'm not going to meet you in your house. We meet in a neutral scenario. We meet when we go for a walk, and we're two people side by side, not facing each other in a boxed room, which is like a boxing ring, these square walls that we in someone else's home environment, where they're going to, you know, go straight into that role of the elder kind of thing. So it's on you to just see that scenario plays out. And I think it was, I can't remember who said it, but there's one quote: "You can't be a prophet in your own home," which is true. But also, yeah, the last, that, I don't know if it was a quote, but yeah, just the highest kind of form of, if you think you're spiritually enlightened, go back and live with your family for a week or something like that. And that is true. But if you meet them in a neutral environment, or my parents came here recently, and it was some of the best we've ever been as adults together, because they're under my guide. I take them to my spots. They see me as my human. It was a Gabor Mate video actually that Peter sent me, and he talked about accountability and acceptance, and it being accepted, or I think it was accountability is the word he uses. And it's like, you go to your parents, and it's like, do you want to be accepted? Authenticity and accepted. And it's like, do you want to be accepted by your parents, and therefore you bend to every whim of them? And this is relationships as well. Or do you want to be authentic, be yourself? And that's the struggle that I think most of us get into as we become more aware, more conscious. We start to want to live in the truth of ourselves, of who we truly are, even around our parents. Like talking to my parents about mushrooms or marijuana for the first time without shame, saying that, yes, I've smoked weed. Like I'm a human that is free to explore. It doesn't make me bad. Now I rarely do that stuff anymore at all now, but I had to go through that to get what I needed to get from it. And to be ashamed of that, I was scared to tell my parents, is not fair. I mean, it's not fair on them for living that way, but it's not their fault. It's on me to accept that, and then I wanted to still live in my authenticity and say, I'm not ashamed. I've done mushrooms. I think they've done great for me in my mind. And my mum would judge me, and if I wanted to be accepted, I would never tell her that stuff. But I wanted to live in the truth of that. So it's kind of those are the struggles that go on. But just truly observing myself, my own relationships, my own reactions. I remember one girl. One of the first girls I ever felt I was in love with, Erin, the great hand balancer, and I'd go to the situation and I'd be like nervous. Does she like me? Does she not? and I'd be timid, and I'd react timid. I'd act timid in the scenario, and it would never work. I would never come away feeling like, oh, she likes me more now. But then there's times when at my energy, I was so content in life, because she lived in London and I live in Derby. I'd be like training and things would be going well with training and making content and successful, like feeling like I'm accomplishing something and progressing in life. And I'd turn up with that energy and I'd leave and she would be like, and that was the first time I kind of felt that, yeah, if you get that, and it seems so obvious saying it now, but it's the first time I noticed that my energy that I brought to the scenario affected the outcome and how they reacted to me and whether they liked me or not. Which is, it's not about being liked or whatever, but I guess what it is in that scenario. But it was just the first time I noticed that working on myself had an effect on how other people saw me, and not chasing their attention or chasing them liking me. And so that was just a huge lesson for me in that moment, was like 20, early 20s, and just being like, wow, the more I just can get myself into a good energy and a good vibe, the more that affects how people see me. And so therefore, rather than chase, try and work on that. And that was a note to self then, and it's 10 years later, it's still a work in progress. You know how it is, like, but I do notice that, and that's why things like nature are the most beautiful tool, because I never come back. The most empowered I kind of feel in the last few years is after I've come back from a nice expedition in the mountains or walking in nature. I just feel so like no one can get to me. I feel kind of like I've got that strength, that vastness, that my soul's expanded, and from that surrounding that I've been around and immersed myself in. And so yeah, I just have to say that me to me, you to you, if you're observant and work on knowing yourself, you'd be the greatest teacher. And you all here probably feel that way, and you probably, the reason you're here is because you sense that too. And I just think that's the key for me, is that. And then this other stuff can help you to think about how you should look at yourself. But that's it. Eckhart Tolle helped me to understand my ego and my mind. Although AJ calls the ego facade self. He says ego is important to a way. That's your personality, and you need that. It's the facade self, which Eckhart Tolle would call ego. But yeah, Eckhart taught me about my facade self, the fake me, the reactionary program to hurt me, and then AJ, Jesus, taught me about the emotional me, helped me to see the emotions in me and how they're running out as programs. And then, yeah, me being the pinnacle and the centerpiece. You are the center of your world. And there's Rumi. I'd like to put Rumi on this list, but I haven't gone too deep. But when there's like people whose quotes pop up and you go, oh, that quote resonates with me. And then there might be someone else, another quote from that person doesn't quite resonate. But one person whose quotes resonate with me the most when I see a different quote every time is Rumi. It's like every quote from him bangs, you know. And it stuck with me from years and years ago. I remember visiting the Eden Project and saw this quote, and I made a little picture with the quote. But it's wisdom is knowing I am nothing, love is knowing I am everything, and between the two, my life moves. And I think that is so beautiful from Rumi, and that is it. Wisdom is knowing you're nothing, love is knowing you're everything, and between the two, the paradoxes of life, and that is one of the biggest ones. So yeah. That's it for me, the 3 greatest spiritual influences of my life. Thank you to all the teachers mentioned, the ancestors before, my ancestors, and the teachers from the past. And thank you to you guys for watching. And yeah, we'll do another one on the 3 greatest sports influences on my life, because sports is a great way to enjoy existence in modern times to a degree. It kind of is also modern war, because you're fighting in a way, but yeah, we'll get into that next time. Thanks for watching, guys. See you in a bit.